My name is Walter Dyckman, and I got a story to tell you about World War II. I was in the U.S. Navy. I was assigned to a seaplane tender called the USS Kenneth Whiting. We were in Okinawa under heavy bombardment and everything else. Our sister ship, which was also our flagship, was the USS Curtis. Aboard that was an officer, which everybody knew because he was an actor. His name was Henry Fonda. I think he was a lieutenant commander. Anyway, he would come to our ship, stay a month or so, go back to the flagship. Well, I was a radioman, and I had messages, and I had to deliver them to the various officers on the ship. I had to go into the wardroom, get the permission from the Marine to get in, and deliver a message to one of them was to Henry Fonda. And he was walking down the aisle, and I finally found him, and I gave him the message, and I saluted at the same time. He had a hat on, and he didn't respond and didn't salute me back, and I felt a little bad about it. Well, this happened about 3 other occasions after that when I had messages delivered to Lieutenant Commander Fonda. I got no salutes at all, and I thought he was very aloof and crude, and I didn't like him right at that spot. Well, the war was over. I was discharged, and about within that year, a movie came out called Mr. Roberts. It was about a very lovable naval officer portrayed by Henry Fonda in the movie. And he's so lovable, the whole crew loves him. He's dying to get into a combat area during World War II. And he's stuck on this tug or something, whatever it was, somewhere in the States. Well, anyway, finally he gets into a combat area and gets killed. But anyway, I wouldn't go to, after that, I says, I know this guy. He didn't salute me back 4 times. I'm not going to go see this movie, Mr. Roberts, even though it was everybody raved about this movie. 70 years elapsed. I'm 93 now, and I was watching Turner Classic Movies, and one of the movies was Mr. Roberts with Henry Fonda. I watched the whole movie, and I enjoyed it very much. And I forgave Henry Fonda for not saluting me for 4 times. Okay.
Hello, and welcome to Stage, Screen, and In Between. I'm Helen. I have a very special guest with me today. I met him through my friend Irene. His name is Walter Dyckman, and he was active during World War II in the Navy. And I thought it would be really interesting for you to hear some of the stories that he's been telling me. Walter, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm very happy to be here, and it's a pleasure for me to talk about it, and Irene has been so good to me, and I hope I can do a good job.
I'm sure that you will, Walter. Now, Walter, you were telling me that you enlisted in the Navy at the age of 19. Can you tell us something about that and where you were stationed?
I enlisted on June the 12th, 1941, in New York, in Manhattan. And I remember swearing in, and I was dressed very nicely. I didn't have to be. And we went on a ferry up to Newport, Rhode Island, where I was in boot camp for about two months or so. After that, after a leave at home, I was sent out to San Diego. There's a communication school in the U.S. Naval Station there, and it was communications. I was trying to be a radioman, and that I was there to. I happened to go on Liberty up to L.A., Los Angeles, about 110 miles away. In those days, none of us had cars or nothing, so we hitchhiked up to Los Angeles. I met a group of people from some church, and they invited a bunch of us sailors to their homes. And we were out, it was happened to be the morning of December the 7th, the day of the attack. And we were out playing football in the street, and the girls were saying, come in, come in, come in. You got to report right back to your stations. The Japs have attacked Pearl Harbor. We didn't hardly believe them, and we kept playing football. And they come out again and said, this is true. You have to go back to your stations, which we found out listening to the radio that the attack was real, and we all headed back to San Diego, the Naval Training Station there. In a short time, we were all sent up to Treasure Island in San Francisco, another naval base, and in no time at all, we were all on a ship called a USS Ferguson, which was a transport with maybe did lucky 8 knots an hour. It was built for World War I transporting. And we were out at sea for quite a while because they were afraid of counterattacks on the Pearl Harbor again, which did not happen. And when I arrived in Pearl Harbor, I saw the 6 battleships still smoking, and the Navy, usually very efficient, was chaotic at that time. We were all mixed up. I told them I was assigned as a radio striker to the USS San Francisco, and which was a heavy cruiser. And they told me that they don't know where the San Francisco, USS San Francisco is, and that I would be assigned to do some work in Pearl Harbor. Well, they found work for me, made me a Marine for 3 months, and I patrolled the beach for 3 months. And after that, I'm telling them I'm a radio striker. I want to get to a radio station, either transmitting or sending. And they said, no, we got another job for you. Went up into the mountains, Koikoi Pass, where there was an ammunition dump. And there I loaded ammunition for about another 2 months, which we took down to Pearl Harbor and loaded the ships. And finally, I got stationed, assigned to WWII, which was a naval transmitting station. And they didn't, it was all transmitters there for the receiving station, which was Waihahu, oh, I can't pronounce it very correctly, up in near Wahiama, up in the mountains. So, and anyway, I went back. My mother was dying, and the Red Cross took me back to the States. I spent 30 days there. I was out in the West Coast. When I got to New York, where my mother was, she was still alive, and she survived that time. But it was a few months later she passed on, and I went back for her funeral. Oh. I was back home, and after we buried my mother, I went back to the West Coast, to San Diego, Treasure Island, which was a naval receiving ship at that time. And I found out I was assigned to a ship being built up in Tacoma, Washington, the USS Kenneth Whiting AV-14. So they sent me up to Tacoma, and I got on the ship, and a few days later, it was on May the 8th, it was commissioned. Being on the ship when it's commissioned, you get the title of being a plank owner. They actually give you a little piece of the plank, and it's a memento, and it's something special. While we were waiting for the ship to to be sent wherever it was going to go. I was on maybe a couple of weeks on the ship in the moored at Tacoma. Finally, we got the orders to get under the way. Now, while I was there, we would go out on the dock, and I have to tell this story. The ship is tied up to the dock with big, what they call rat lines. They are ropes with probably 2.5 to 3 inches in diameter. Now, the state of Washington has the biggest rats you ever seen. The rats were going up the rat line over the funnels. They were so big. The funnels was to prevent them from getting on the ship. So I watched these rats go up there. Well, before you know it, we were there for quite a while, and the rats multiplied. And when we finally left, my captain asked for permission to go to this special place where they would degas the ship. The whole crew would leave the ship and get rid of all the rats. Well, we didn't have time. We had to get to Pearl Harbor and then to Guadalcanal. At Pearl Harbor, we tried again to get the ship gassed, get rid of the rats. There was hundreds and hundreds of rats by this time now on the ship. But the port master said, I'll give you 16 live ferrets. We'll put them all over the ship. They'll have their own cages, and they will kill the rats. And actually, that's what happened. We're aboard, going to Pearl Harbor, going to Guadalcanal, and the ferrets were doing a great job. There was dead rats all over the ship, and us sailors had to pick them up by the tail and throw them overboard. And finally, we got rid of most of the rats. But I had an experience. We're yet not in a combat area, and the captain said that if you want to go up from topside and sleep, you can. So we brought our bedding up, and I put mine on a gun magazine, and I laid there, and my skibby drawers just on, and I'm looking up at the sky, at the Polynesian moon. It's beautiful. It's so bright you could read a newspaper. Well, before you know it, a rat used my belly as a launching pad, and I could feel his claws into my stomach. And I stood up in fright, and a moment later, the ferret did the same thing off my stomach. Oh, I shook. I couldn't sleep. I went over to the railing, and I just stood there for hours. And it caused me a problem for many years, where if a friendly cat or a dog would come up on my bed, and I couldn't, it would frighten me. Anyway, we finally landed at Guadalcanal, and we were sent right out up to the Marianas, where the attack and invasion of Saipan in the Marianas Antillean was taking place. We joined the fleet, which was the 7th Fleet, as an auxiliary ship, and we were in the invasion of Saipan. And we saw a lot of action. We were stationed there for several months, and then we went down to Eniwetok and Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands and spent some time there. There was some raids from the Japs while we were there. Then we were sent to Okinawa, the invasion of Okinawa, which was a gigantic invasion at that time. And once again, the fleet had to soften up the island for the Marines and soldiers to go ashore. So while in Okinawa, we had many attacks. We had to fight off the Japs, and we were on the kamikaze attack for months and months as well as attacks from bombers and fighter planes strafing us and all. So we went through a lot of hell there. And there happened to be what the Japs were doing. They were timing 350 miles to the north was Honshu, which a fleet of kamikazes and other planes would come from and attack us. Just as soon as they left, another fleet of planes came from Taiwan. More kamikazes, more fighter pilots, more bombers. So we never got any rest at all. It was called Condition Red. There was general quarters all the time. So finally there was a lull one day, and then it lasted 2 weeks, no attacks at all. And our captain thought maybe things were getting better, maybe there was a lack of planes, they were losing their planes too. He said, all right, all you guys you can go up on top deck and relax. Now was not a good student or a good book reader, but I decided to go to the library and I got a book by A.J. Cronin, a Scottish writer, and the name of the book was The Stars Look Down. It was about a bunch of Welsh coal miners trapped in a mine in Wales. I happened to be on the left side on the 11th page, 2 paragraphs down, and I looked up. First of all, we'd always look up at the sky. We heard planes, and if we saw a star on each end of the wing, we knew it was ours, and we went to continue to do what we were doing. But I took a look, and I saw 2 planes with red balls on the end of their wings. They were Japanese logo for being Japanese planes. So I knew that the attack was going to be on. I started to run to my gun station. We happened to have 1,000 men on that ship at that time. 500 happened to be Airedales, Navy airmen. They had no battle stations. But 500 was crew members, and we had to get to our battle stations. And at this time, because they had to get out of the way, it was very difficult to get down to the battle station in time. But anyway, when I got down there, onto the deck where my gun was, I looked out at the sea, and there was the other kamikaze. Let me say this, the first kamikaze I saw hit our sister ship, which was moored half a mile away or so, and it went right down the stack and killed many. And the flames must have went up 400 feet in the air. The other one, he circled the bay, and when I got down to the railing where my gun was, I looked out, and this Betsy was just about a few football fields away, and in seconds I had to find refuge. I ran as fast as I could. There was a turn in the deck. I made a hook slide around it, and simultaneously at the same time come a piece of orange shrapnel, a fuselage of the kamikaze plane. And I pushed it away and burned my right hand. But anyway, I heard the explosion. I was so thankful to be alive. The ship was starting to list because it was taking in tons of water with the hole the kamikaze plane made in the side of the ship. And finally, struggling, I got down to my berth, and we had to be accounted for, and we took a muster of who was there and who wasn't. Well, we didn't have the amount of people killed that the Curtis did, but we still had quite a bit and a lot wounded. Referring to the kamikaze attack on my ship, if you remember, I ran and slid around the deck, and simultaneously this orange piece of shrapnel with the fuselage from the Japanese kamikaze plane came very close to me. I pushed it away with my right hand to protect myself and any of my shipmates that were around me. And I burned my hand, and I had to go down to sick bay, and they treated it and bandaged it. The next day, our captain said, any of you that were wounded, hurt, or something during the kamikaze attack, go down and see Lieutenant, and I forgot his name, and tell him the story of what happened to you. He, and this way here, you'll be eligible for a Purple Heart. I gave it some thought, and I thought about it, and I said, what I did to push the shrapnel away from hurting myself and others really wasn't that heroic. Well, I won't go down and tell my story, so I never did. Tell and apply for the Purple Heart.
So Walter, let me ask you: do you have any friends that have survived the war along with you that you keep in touch with?
Yes, there are. I had went to this past May. I went to my 17th naval reunion, which are all over the country. This one happened to be in Seattle, Washington. Being I'm legally blind, I needed a guardian. And somehow I got a Navy SEAL and an FBI guy, which was the rest of them just loved it. There happens to be 4 of us left that was on the commissioning of our ship and on the kamikaze attack.
And what was the name of your ship again?
The name of my ship was the USS Kenneth Whiting AV-14. All of these 4, one is myself, are in their 90s, and I have one named Hal Sawyer. He lives in Seattle, and I'm always in telephone contact with him. So
now tell me, you were also flown to Washington for a special memorial. Do you want to tell us something about that?
Yes, I would like to. This happened to be on October the 24th, 2012. I had been invited as a World War II veteran to go on what they call the honor flight, which left Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and went to Washington. There were 76 of us. We were all from the Carolinas, 76 World War II veterans. It was a magnificent flight and time. We were all treated like heroes. There was bands at the Ronald.
You are heroes.
There was bands at the Ronald Reagan Airport. We toured all the war memorials, and everything was wonderful.
Jim Furr and Walter Dyckman consider themselves old friends. They just met before boarding the plane. They were both looking forward to seeing the Navy Memorial.
So proud to be in the Navy and a veteran and survived to this point of my life.
6 veterans who made the trip truly enjoyed their brief one-day tour of Washington landmarks, but then they knew that before they even got on the plane.
All of us are going to have a good time, a very memorable time. We'll never forget it.